Daniel Hayes had everything money could buy. From the top floor of his glass mansion overlooking the city skyline, he could see the empire he had built, corporate towers stamped with the silver H logo, restaurants that carried his name, and luxury cars parked in perfect symmetry beneath him. At 45, Daniel was known as a self-made millionaire, a man who turned struggle into strategy and pain into profit. But there was one chapter of his life he never spoke about. Her name was Lila. 20 years ago, before the suits and stockholders, before the polished speeches and charity galas, Daniel and Lila had shared a tiny apartment with peeling paint and broken heating. They had eaten noodles for dinner and dreamed big dreams under a leaking roof. Lila had believed in him before the world did. She worked 2 jobs while he built his first company. She typed his business proposals when he couldn't afford a secretary. She sold her grandmother's necklace to help him pay for his first product prototype. Then success came. And with success came distance. Daniel became busier, colder, ambitious in ways that left no room for love. Lila wanted family dinners. Daniel wanted investors. She wanted a simple home. He wanted skyscrapers. The divorce had been quiet but painful. No dramatic courtroom scenes. Just 2 tired souls signing papers at a wooden table, pretending they weren't breaking something sacred. After the divorce, Daniel's life soared. Lila's collapsed. Her small bakery failed during a recession. Medical bills piled up after she cared for her sick mother. Within a few years, she had lost her home. Pride kept her silent. She never reached out. Daniel heard about her situation through whispers, old mutual friends mentioning she was going through a hard time. He never checked. Until one evening. It was the anniversary of his company's 20th year, and Daniel planned a lavish celebration at the Grand Aurora Hotel. Politicians, CEOs, media, everyone important would attend. As his assistant reviewed the guest list, Daniel's eyes lingered on a blank space. "Add Lila Hayes," he said casually. His assistant hesitated. "Your ex-wife?" Daniel smirked. "Yes. Send her a formal invitation. VIP seating." He told himself it was harmless. A joke. A way to show how far he'd come. Maybe even to prove he had won the divorce. Deep down, it wasn't victory he wanted. It was validation. He imagined her walking in, seeing the chandeliers, the diamond necklaces, the cameras flashing around him. He imagined her regret. But when the invitation reached Lila, it felt like reopening an old wound. She was living in a small women's shelter on the edge of town. She helped clean the kitchen in exchange for a bed. Her clothes were worn but neatly folded. Her hair had silver strands now. When she opened the envelope with Daniel's embossed logo, her hands trembled. 20 years of excellence, Daniel Hayes. She smiled softly. Not with bitterness. With memory. She didn't see a millionaire. She saw the young man who once burned toast and promised her the world. She almost didn't go. But something inside her whispered, closure. So she borrowed a simple navy dress from another woman at the shelter. She repaired the loose seam by hand. She polished her old shoes until they shone like they once had on their wedding day. The night of the gala arrived. Luxury cars lined the entrance of the Grand Aurora. Cameras flashed. Laughter echoed beneath crystal chandeliers. Daniel stood on the red carpet, confident and composed. Then a taxi stopped at the curb. It wasn't glamorous. It didn't belong. But when Lila stepped out, the world seemed to pause. She wasn't wearing diamonds. She wasn't draped in designer silk. But she carried herself with quiet dignity. Her eyes searched the crowd, not for wealth, but for a familiar face. Daniel saw her. And for the first time in years, his heart didn't feel powerful. It felt small. He expected shame in her eyes. Instead, he saw peace. And in that moment, something inside him shifted. But he didn't yet understand how much everything was about to change. Because Lila hadn't come to be humiliated. She had come to say goodbye. The ballroom shimmered with gold light. Crystal chandeliers reflected off marble floors polished to perfection. The scent of expensive perfume and aged wine lingered in the air. Conversations floated like soft music among guests dressed in elegance and status. Daniel stood at the center of it all. He was in his element. Firm handshakes, controlled smiles, effortless confidence. Reporters asked about his latest expansion overseas. Investors praised his vision. He was admired, envied, celebrated. But his eyes kept drifting toward the entrance. And then she walked in. Lila didn't glide across the floor like the socialites. She moved carefully, almost cautiously, as if she were stepping into a memory rather than a party. A few heads turned, not because she sparkled, but because she didn't. She looked real. Simple navy dress. Minimal makeup. Hair pinned back neatly. There was no sparkle around her neck, no glitter at her wrists. Yet something about her presence quieted the noise around Daniel. He approached her with a rehearsed smile. "Lila," he said smoothly, "you made it." She smiled back gently. "Congratulations, Daniel. 20 years is impressive." There was no sarcasm, no bitterness. That unsettled him. He had prepared himself for awkwardness, maybe resentment. Instead, she seemed proud of him. "You look well," he added, scanning her modest outfit. "And you look successful," she replied. For a moment, silence stood between them like an invisible wall built from years of distance. Daniel gestured toward the crowd. "I thought it would be good for you to see this. Everything turned out quite well." Lila nodded. "I always knew it would." The words hit him harder than he expected. Always knew. She had believed in him before the applause, before the headlines. A group of executives approached Daniel, pulling him briefly away. As he turned back moments later, he noticed something unexpected. Lila wasn't shrinking in the corner. She was helping an elderly waitress who had nearly dropped a tray of champagne glasses. Lila steadied her hands, whispering something kind. The waitress smiled gratefully. Later, Daniel saw her kneel beside a janitor who struggled to fix a jammed cartwheel. She held the flashlight steady while he worked. No one else noticed. But Daniel did. And it confused him. Why wasn't she embarrassed? Why wasn't she overwhelmed? Instead of looking out of place, she looked purposeful. During dinner, Daniel took the stage. The spotlight framed him in brilliance. Applause erupted as he began his speech about perseverance, ambition, and vision. He spoke about risk. He spoke about sacrifice. He spoke about sleepless nights building something from nothing. But as he spoke, his eyes found Lila sitting quietly near the back. And suddenly, the story felt incomplete. He was talking about doing it alone. But he hadn't been alone. She had been there, typing business plans at midnight, encouraging him when investors laughed at his ideas, skipping meals so he could afford meetings. His voice faltered for just a second. The audience didn't notice. Lila did. After the speech, applause thundered through the hall. Daniel stepped down from the stage, expecting Lila to approach him. Instead, she began walking toward the exit. He followed. "Leaving already?" he asked. "I didn't want to stay too long," she said softly. "This is your night." He studied her face. There was no regret, only closure. "Lila," he said more quietly now, "are you okay?" She paused. "I've had difficult years," she admitted. "But I'm okay. Hard times don't erase who you are. They just remind you what matters." He swallowed. He had invited her to feel superior. But standing before her now, he didn't feel above her. He felt beneath something he couldn't define. Before he could respond, a sudden commotion interrupted them. Near the entrance, one of the security guards was speaking sharply to a young boy, no older than 10, who had slipped inside the hotel. The boy looked frightened, clutching a small paper bag. Daniel frowned. "What is this?" The guard answered, "He says he's here to see her." He pointed at Lila. Lila's eyes widened. "Tommy." She whispered. The boy's face lit up. "Miss Lila." He ran toward her, and she knelt to embrace him tightly. The ballroom guests watched in confusion. Daniel felt the ground shift beneath him. Because suddenly, the night wasn't about his empire. It was about a homeless woman who had shown up not alone, but carrying a story he didn't yet know. And that story was about to change everything. Tommy clung to Lila as though she were the only safe place in the world. His clothes were worn, his shoes slightly torn at the edges. But his smile was bright and full of trust. Daniel watched, stunned. "You know this boy?" he asked quietly. Lila nodded, brushing Tommy's hair gently from his forehead. He stays at the shelter where I live. The word shelter echoed in Daniel's mind like a bell he could no longer ignore. Tommy held up the small paper bag. I made you something, he said shyly. Lila opened it carefully. Inside was a handmade card, folded unevenly. On the front, drawn with crayons, were two stick figures holding hands under a bright yellow sun. Inside, in messy handwriting, it read, "Thank you for teaching me I matter." Daniel felt his throat tighten. Miss Lila helps everyone, Tommy added proudly. She reads to us at night, and she makes the little kids stop crying. The security guard stepped back awkwardly, sensing something deeper unfolding. Guests nearby began whispering. Daniel looked at Lila again, but this time, not as his ex-wife, as someone he didn't truly know anymore. You live in a shelter? He asked. For now, she answered calmly. Life shifts. We adjust. Tommy tugged her sleeve. Are you coming back tonight? Yes, she smiled. Of course. Daniel's chest felt heavy. This wasn't how he imagined the evening. He imagined triumph. Instead, he felt exposed. How long? He asked softly. 3 years, she replied. 3 years. And he never knew. Or perhaps he never asked. Tommy looked up at Daniel. Are you her friend? The question pierced deeper than any accusation could have. Daniel hesitated. I used to be. Lila gave him a gentle look. Not accusing. Not blaming. Just honest. I should take him back, she said. He shouldn't have come alone. Daniel looked at the crowd watching them. The cameras. The crystal chandeliers. And then at the little boy holding a handmade card. Something inside him broke, not loudly, but quietly, like ice cracking under weight. I'll drive you, Daniel said suddenly. Lila hesitated. You don't have to. I want to. The ballroom buzzed as Daniel Hayes, millionaire host of the night, walked out early, with a homeless woman and a child. No speech prepared him for the silence inside his luxury car. Tommy fell asleep in the back seat halfway through the ride. City lights flickered past the windows. Why didn't you tell me? Daniel finally asked. Lila kept her eyes forward. What would I have said? Hello, Daniel. I lost everything? You were building an empire. I didn't want to be a shadow from your past. You were never a shadow. She looked at him gently. Daniel, I was part of your foundation, but you built the rest. They arrived at the shelter, a modest brick building with peeling paint and dim lights. Daniel stepped out, staring at it. This was where she lived, the woman who once shared his dreams. Inside, several children ran to Lila, hugging her tightly. Women greeted her warmly. Miss Lila, we saved you dinner. One called. Daniel stood frozen at the doorway. He had spent millions on image. She had spent nothing, and built something far greater. Community. Love. Meaning. As she tucked Tommy into his small bed, Daniel watched quietly from the hall. Good night, champ, she whispered. Night, Miss Lila. When she stepped back outside, Daniel was waiting. I invited you to prove something, he admitted quietly. I know, she replied. His eyes filled, not with humiliation, with regret. I thought if you saw what I became, it would make me feel complete. And does it? She asked softly. He looked at the shelter behind her, at the faint laughter drifting through cracked windows, at the peace in her eyes. No, he whispered. For the first time in years, Daniel Hayes understood something no amount of wealth had taught him. Success without compassion is empty, and the woman he once thought he had outgrown had grown far beyond him. Daniel didn't sleep that night. The gala continued without him. News outlets reported his early departure as a mysterious exit. Investors texted. His assistant called repeatedly. He ignored them all. Instead, he sat in his dark living room, staring at the city lights that once felt like trophies. He thought about Lila's steady hands helping a waitress, her gentle voice comforting children, the handmade card that read, You matter. When was the last time anyone said that to him without expecting something in return? By morning, his decision was made. He drove back to the shelter, Not in a limousine, but alone. The staff recognized him immediately, surprised but cautious. "I'd like to speak with Lila," he said respectfully. She met him outside in the small courtyard. "Did you forget something?" She asked lightly. "Yes," he answered. "I forgot who I was." She studied him carefully. "I built companies," he continued, "but I forgot why I started. I wanted to create security, stability, a home." His voice trembled slightly. "And I left the person who gave me those things when I had nothing." Lila's expression softened, but she remained quiet. "I can't change the past," he said, "but I can change what I do next." He handed her a folder. Inside were documents, property transfers, investment plans, funding approvals. For the shelter, he explained, renovations, education programs, counseling services, long-term sustainability. Lila looked up sharply. "Daniel." "No publicity," he added quickly. "No headlines. Just help." She closed the folder slowly. "You don't owe me this." "I'm not doing it because I owe you," he said gently. "I'm doing it because you reminded me what matters." Tears shimmered in her eyes, but they didn't fall. Instead, she smiled. The same smile she wore 20 years ago, when she believed in a young man with impossible dreams. Over the next months, Daniel became a quiet presence at the shelter. He fixed broken steps. He read stories to children. He listened. Not as a millionaire, as a human being. The shelter transformed. Fresh paint covered cracked walls. Classrooms were built. A small bakery program opened. Lila teaching women how to bake and manage small businesses. Daniel funded it, but Lila led it. And slowly, something unexpected grew between them, not romance fueled by nostalgia, but respect rooted in growth. They were no longer the young couple chasing dreams. They were two people who had survived loss and found purpose again. 1 year later, the anniversary returned. But this time, there was no grand hotel. Instead, the celebration took place in the courtyard of the newly renovated community center, formerly the shelter. Children laughed under string lights. Women shared food from the bakery. Music played softly. Daniel stood beside Lila, not in a tuxedo, but in rolled-up sleeves. A small stage was set up. Tommy, now taller and confident, stepped forward holding a microphone. "This place used to be broken," he said proudly, "but now it's home." Applause filled the air. Daniel glanced at Lila. "You built this," he whispered. She shook her head gently. "We did." He realized then that wealth isn't measured in bank accounts. It's measured in lives touched. That night, as the crowd dispersed and the stars stretched across the sky, Daniel turned to her. "I invited you once to embarrass you," he said quietly, "and you ended up saving me." Lila smiled. "Sometimes," she replied, "life humbles us before it heals us." Daniel didn't need headlines anymore. He didn't need validation. Because for the first time in decades, he felt something far richer than success. He felt whole. And everything had changed. Not because a millionaire tried to humiliate his homeless ex-wife, but because she arrived with grace, dignity, and a heart that reminded him what true wealth looks like. And in the end, the joke was never on her. It was on the man who thought money made him powerful, until love quietly proved otherwise.